Hello and welcome to the Justice and Coffee podcast, the podcast where we discuss a variety of justice-related issues affecting the world over a cup of coffee. This week I got the chance to talk with Emily Chalke, the founder of Ella's. Ella's is a charity that Emily set up back in 2014 to provide safe housing and long-term aftercare for women who have experienced abuse through trafficking and exploitation. We sat down together on Ash Wednesday, 2020, after a long day's work and enjoyed a pot of Blue Bear Colombian decaf and a stack of pancakes. I should mention we recorded this one in Emily's lovely London flat, but it is quite close to a railway line, so every 5 or so minutes you may hear a locomotive or two rumbling gently past the window. Emily is an incredibly humble and servant-hearted individual who has been resisting my many invitations to come on the podcast and share her story with us, but she finally acquiesced, and I'm so glad she did. Emily Chalke, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for having me in your apartment this fine evening.
You're very welcome.
It's unusual for us to do it this way, but you've been so busy recently that getting the time to get you in the studio in the daytime hours and record this it's just been almost impossible. So what is it? 5 minutes past 8 on Ash Wednesday.
Ash Wednesday, yeah.
So we're doing a sort of late night podcast with Emily Chalke tonight. And I have coffee and pancakes because it was pancake day yesterday, right?
Yes.
But we can still have them. So this is probably number 4 or 5. Thank you for preparing these for me.
Very welcome.
I've also got coffee now. I was wondering about this on the way over, whether drinking coffee this time of night was wise, even though it's decaf, right? I just think, ostensibly, if it looks like coffee and smells like coffee and has the aroma, has the heat, will it have a placebo effect, even if the caffeine's been extracted from it, and keep you up at night? What do you think?
It will keep me up at night, so I'm not risking it.
Which is why you're drinking gin and tonic. Against the New Year's resolution.
You weren't meant to tell anybody that.
Busted. That's okay. We could rename it the Justice and Gin and Tonic podcast. It's got a ring to it. Emily, I've wanted to get you on this podcast for some time now. I'm glad we finally made it happen. As you know, I was in Thailand a few weeks ago with work, and I decided to sort of upload a picture, sort of using the Blue Bear mug or a Blue Bear coffee bag or one of our stickers or something to denote my presence in Thailand and talk about some of the partnerships we have at Blue Bear. And within seconds of that, within minutes or even hours of that going live, I got a text message from you saying, well, just demonstrably sharing how excited you were that I was in Thailand, because Thailand, particularly Bangkok, means quite a lot to you, doesn't it? Why is that?
Yes, it does, because I lived there from 2006 to December 2011. I moved there when I was 23 years old, and I lived in Nana, which is where you visited. Yeah,
so describe that part of Bangkok, because I didn't know what to expect when I arrived, and I found it. Yeah, I liked it, and I think I texted myself, I'm already, I've been here 4 hours and I already love it. It's that exciting sort of cornucopia of activity and vibrance and smell and flavour and movement and sound and that all of those metropolis feelings, and sensations. I personally love those. I find them sort of intoxicating and exciting, but obviously it has a lot of problems too. So for people that haven't been to Bangkok, particularly Nana and the red light district, which is actually where you lived, right?
Yeah.
Describe it to somebody for me, or do your best to, if you can.
So Nana is a huge red light district. I forget now how many thousands of women, young women, will be in the sex industry there, but it's so prevalent. I couldn't leave my apartment when I lived there without seeing young Thai women with old white men, and it was just it's everywhere you look in that area. So I used to visit in the bars where the Thai women work, and that they would predominantly cater for Western men.
Yeah.
But then not far up the road was the area Sukhumvit Soi 3, where lots of Uzbek women worked, who I ended up mostly working with, and they would cater for the Arab men. And then there was another section where you would find African women. So there's women from all over the world, and men from all over the world as well. It's a huge problem.
What I found quite bizarre about it really was just how open people were. Now, I was probably to be fair to say, the younger sort of range of that demographic, but still very much in that demographic as a white single male walking around the red light district. And I picked up a conversation with a guy when I was there in a bar whilst I was working, and he was from Australia, probably sort of early 60s, had a quite tragic story about losing his wife actually in Thailand in a tuk-tuk accident. It's sad, but he started off quite sort of reserved about why he was chosen to spend that time there, but by the end he was very, very open with the fact that he uses sex workers quite frequently, and began to advise me on where it would be appropriate to get the best price and all the rest. But it really didn't take a lot to get that information from him. And later on, I was in my hotel gym, and it was mainly full of white, different sort of guys between 30 and 60 probably on their own, and to some degree living the dream, what they thought was the dream of working on offshore rigs or whatever, coming to spend their time and money in Bangkok because it gave the opportunity for fairly cheap beer, cheap food, and young women. I just found it bizarre just how flagrant it was, how blatant it was, how openly discussed it was. And what was it like to be a young woman in that environment, spending the majority of your early years there between 23 and 30 or 29?
Well, about the men, I guess, so when I was living there and seeing that every day, people would assume that I hated those men, and I mean, I'm asked that all the time. You must hate men. It's I remember my mum coming to visit me and her crying when she was like, "I just hate that you have to see this every day," and but it became so normal that didn't even really notice it anymore, and actually even began to have a lot of compassion for many of the men that I met. So I would go into Nana Red Light District and sit in the bars and have conversations there with the women, but occasionally would have conversations with the men who were there to meet the women, and lots of really really difficult conversations with them too. I remember one man telling me he hated himself for being there, and he would go back later. He said he would be in his room and he would ask for forgiveness for what he was doing and being there, and just and another time, and actually an Australian guy as well, I hadn't said anything to him. I was just sat, I think I'd sat talking to a woman. She then went back up to the stage to dance, and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "I just want you to know I feel so guilty with you sat here." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "I can see that you're befriending this woman," and then I got to explain about why young women ended up in that situation, and he got up and left.
Wow.
And so many examples of that. And another guy who I sat talking to, and we got chatting, and he had a wedding ring on. I said, "What do you think your wife would think about you sat here?" And he was like, yeah, I don't know. And he said about, I was just told that this is what people do when they're in Thailand.
Yeah.
It's the normal thing to do. And I asked him if he had any children. He said, I've got a couple of daughters. I asked him how old they were. He's they were 19, 20 or whatever. And he then just looked at me and he said, please don't say it. Please don't say it. And, you know, obviously what I could say is that could be your daughter.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's so dangerous. People go there and they just assume, well, this is, everyone's happy doing this here.
Yeah.
This is just what people do in Thailand. Yeah. But don't stop to obviously understand the reasons why women are ending up in that situation.
I want to come back to that and see if we can find out a little bit more about your perspective as having spent so much of your time there. But I also want to know, like, how did you end up there? Was it a sort of post-university gap year that just kept pushing back your return flight? Like, where did this interest in Thailand, where was that born from?
Well, yeah, it was way back from childhood. So yeah, I think I do remember my dad when I was a child, must have been, I don't know, 9 or 10, and he came back from a trip, and he used to go to Asia regularly for work, but one day he was in Thailand and he came home, and I remember him saying that he'd been to this children's home and it made him cry because it was so terrible, the conditions that children were being kept in. And I knew that, you know, he'd seen a lot and been to a lot of different countries. I remember thinking, wow, if that's made him cry, I don't think I'd seen him cry at that point. So I was like, that must be so awful. Wow. So I thought, well, that's where I'd like to go. And
how old were you when you noticed this?
I mean, I don't know, must have been 9 or 10. But by the time I was first day of school, so my best friend Cassie, we met on the first day of school.
What, secondary school?
Secondary school, yeah. And she says, I mean, I don't remember this conversation, but she says she asked me on the first day of school, Emily, what do you want to do when you're older? And I said to her, oh, I'm going to go to Thailand and I'm going to help women out of prostitution. I guess I must have, you know, after hearing about Thailand,
Wow.
read up, and you hear that there is this industry in Thailand, and I thought, that's terrible that women and, you know, young women have to experience that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it stayed with you. I think if I'd have told my 12-year-old pal that what I was going to do in my life, it would have probably been, I'm going to be a stuntman or you know, famous actor or something. That obviously didn't happen with my life. But you saw that through. I mean, it was an unusual thing probably for a 12-year-old girl to say anyway, but fast forward a decade and you sort of cracked on with that plan.
I used to pray that I wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it was a strange idea, strange plan. But, it just didn't go away. And then I had the opportunity, actually, I went with Cassie, the same friend. She came with me in 2005. It was the point when I was like, right, I really need to do this. And she came with me. We actually I didn't have any contacts in Thailand, so we actually spent a few weeks in Cambodia.
Oh, wow.
Checking out some work there, and which was good. But the moment I landed in Bangkok, I was like, this is where I want to be.
Wow.
And I remember her being very cross with me. She was like, we've just spent 5 weeks in Cambodia. You've been in Bangkok 3 minutes. You can't decide. But I knew that I wanted to be there.
You just connected with it straight away. You say you were looking at some work, so obviously you weren't just like, you know, bumming it over there. Yeah. You know, what were you doing? What was this type of work that you're involved in? I was
visiting projects that were working with actually child trafficking victims in Cambodia.
Wow.
So there's lots of great work. Actually, I'm now a trustee of a charity in Cambodia, doing some good work there.
So you're drawn to Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific, that was always trafficking. It wasn't for other reasons. It was that issue that drew you there.
Yeah.
And when you're in Bangkok, who are you working for?
An organisation called Nightlight. So actually, it wasn't specifically trafficking. I think I probably only began to understand that as I was, as I got there, and I remember the very first night I went out on the streets of Bangkok to. So we used to go out 2 nights a week to meet the women, and the very first night, so I was 23 years old. Was walking along with Annie, and we ran into this.
Who's Annie?
Oh, Annie started Nightlight, runs Nightlight.
Name check.
And we bumped into this African woman, and she'd been trafficked to Bangkok, and heard her story, and I just remember thinking, this is so crazy. I've moved to Asia, and here I am meeting an African woman. And then she was the first African woman that I met, and she was the only one really around at that time. But within, I think, about 6 months, there was more and more. And now, there's, I don't know, hundreds of African women trafficked.
So why do you think that's happening? Why do you think it's not just Thai women are enough for the customers? Why is there a need to traffic African women to that area?
Yeah, a demand for it, and as the route has become available, more and more just
demand for variety.
To take that path, and so actually we used to. Towards the end of my time there was different streets, roads I would have to avoid getting home if I wanted to get home quickly, because there were so many African women, and I got to know lots of them, and they would all want to stop and talk or pray, and so I would have to take different routes home. But Nightlight, have helped so many of these women get home over the last few years.
So you obviously, after noticing I was there, mentioned a couple of people, whilst you're there you should see if you can connect with this person. I'm really grateful for that. I really enjoyed the people I was able to meet whilst I was over there. And you mentioned Nightlight, so I went and had a coffee there or an iced tea or something, and I loved it. It's such a cool so Nightlight have a coffee shop bang in the middle of the red light district, a really good quality
called City Light,
really cool quality specialty coffee shop. And obviously I was dropping your name, Emily Chalke, left, right and centre, and everybody certainly in City Light responded to that name. I even got you on FaceTime to show you to some of the women there. I wasn't able to meet Annie though, unfortunately on this occasion, but maybe next time. And so how did you get connected with her?
I met Annie. So I spent a few weeks in Cambodia, as I said, and while I was in Cambodia, somebody I met there said, "Oh, you should meet Annie in Bangkok." And so I I don't think I actually had a mobile phone back in those days. Whatever.
Sent a carrier pigeon.
Communicated with her, and we met up, and I think I had literally 2 days in Bangkok before I was flying back to London. I met her, talked to her for half an hour, and within that time I knew I wanted to come work. They were newly set up, and I said to my friend Cassie, she's who I want to work with, this is what I want to do. I'm going to come back here as soon as I can.
And that's exactly what you did?
That's exactly what I did. But I think I moved out there, maybe 6 months later.
Amazing. So what brought you? So 6 years of your life was spent there, engaged with Nightlight, building relationships. The purpose of those relationships were to do what? To offer opportunity, knowledge, education, inform people. It worked with the police. How did that work?
It developed quite a lot over the years that I was there. So Nightlight, they run a jewellery business and as the coffee shop and alternative employment for women. So Thai women. Used to, as I said, connect with those women, the Thai women, and it was to build relationships, offer an alternative, or simply just to be friends and with those women. However, within my first year there, I then started going to this other area, just not far away from where the Thai women worked, and this is where the Uzbek women from Uzbekistan predominantly worked, and began connecting with them. And soon I realised that was my main focus, because I was really able to connect with those women. They used to think I was one of them, so just would welcome me in until I spoke English and didn't speak Russian, but got on really well with those women. And with I think it took about a year before the first Uzbek girl asked me for help, and so I would go, as I said, a couple of times a week and just sit in this really smoky, horrible bar and just get to know them. And I would hear time and time again, there's no life in my country. Some of these women were quite educated, but for whatever reason, they were unable to get good employment. They just wasn't the opportunity. And so then they'd become vulnerable to being trafficked. And so, as I said, heard countless times, there's no life in my country, this is why I've come to Bangkok, or this, so lots of those difficult stories. And one day, it was one evening in the bar, and one of the women said to me, "Oh, do you see this woman over here? She's being beaten up by her pimp. She's got bruises all over her. She's had her passport stolen. We've been told that maybe you can help her." So we arranged to meet at another hotel, because I can't remember. We planned for this woman to say that she'd gone for a customer, and we met her at another hotel. And that night she escaped, and she actually brought a friend with her. We took them to a safe place, and within about 3 weeks, they'd gone back home to their country. And that was the first case of then, I don't know how many, from whatever happened at that point, they kind of knew, this English girl and this American woman, if you see them. Yeah, so not all of the women felt that was they wanted to get out, but it depended on who their trafficker was, or who. So some of the women were treated really badly and wanted a way out. Others thought, okay, I'm going to pay off my debt and try and earn a bit of money and then go home. Yeah. But so it's all sorts of different situations. Did
you imagine if the women started to become aware that you and the other American white woman were an opportunity of an escape if they needed it? I can imagine that the pimps and the traffickers might have become aware of that as well. Is that true?
Yeah, apparently. I don't know. Yeah. Well.
Did you ever feel that you were under threat at all? Because you lived right in the middle.
Yeah,
of it, right?
I did. I lived right in the. The women. I was told numerous times, "You be careful, because next time they'll kill you or they'll get you." But I genuinely never felt unsafe there. I grew up in Croydon.
There you go. You've had your training.
And
hostile awareness training.
I could never walk up my own street without calling my brothers or my dad and can you come? But in Bangkok, I felt perfectly safe anytime. Maybe because it was busy and but I never felt that. And maybe it was because it felt like it was the work that I needed to do, and I don't know. But
it's not often that I hear people chuckle at the idea of someone coming up to them and telling them that there's a threat that they might be killed. Yeah,
I can't even get in an Uber by myself, so it's not that I'm brave, but.
So you had a supernatural gifting of bravery whilst you were over there.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
It's remarkable. What brought you home?
I came back to London. I left Bangkok, coming back to London, saying I'm going to move to Uzbekistan, because honestly don't think I would have ever come back to London if I thought,
that's me now.
like that seemed way too boring. But I came back, and I guess I was probably quite burnt out. And I remember saying to someone, I just want a job where no one tells me their problems, and I can just have a bit of time. And then I thought, you have to be careful what you wish for, because I ended up working in a reception, and it was really boring. So I did that for a few months, and then started thinking about where was next. And I did go out to Uzbekistan, actually. The Thai anti-trafficking police invited me to a conference out there, and went to, I don't know, speak to some people about the situation in Bangkok. And so got to go there, got to visit some of the women that we'd helped.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was
That's
really
great.
cool. Yeah. And so I'm still in touch with several of them. And so that was really good. But I also thought that would be a huge move, having just come back from Bangkok. And I don't think it was, at that point, one that I was able to do.
Yeah.
So ended up back in London.
But as we speak today, you're not working as a receptionist.
No.
You've got yourself...
Nothing against that. But
there's absolutely nothing against that. But that's not the career path you've taken. You've started your own charity.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, so...
And what is it? What is your charity?
It's called Ella's. We're a new charity, actually. Just got a charity number because up until a few weeks ago we were a project under a bigger charity. But we're now, our own charity.
But you've been going a bit...
We've been going for about 4 years.
Okay.
Or 5 years. Yeah, depends when you start counting.
Yeah.
So we run a couple of homes for women who've come out of situations of trafficking and exploitation. And the idea is for it to be long-term, to be a place where women can feel that they have stability so that they can start piecing back their life and accessing counselling, accessing education, employment, and whatever else is needed for them to get their life back on track.
Why did you start that?
It's back to the Uzbek women again, and Bangkok. So it is called Ella's because it's named after Ella, who I met in Bangkok. And so I met her, I think I said to you when we spoke on the phone when you were in Bangkok. She was working in a place that would have been directly opposite City Light coffee shop. And I got to know her over several years, and she was always on her own. She is ethnically Russian, and maybe that's why, I don't know, that the other women didn't speak to her. I don't know. But anyway, I would spend a lot of time with her. So when I left Bangkok, I gave her my email address, not really thinking I would hear from her again. And she emailed me a few times over the course of the first year that I was back here in London. And then in the December, by actually which point I was thinking maybe I should move back to Bangkok because I'd spent a year in London and wasn't particularly enjoying it. And she emailed me and she said she was in London, could we meet up? So I shared my phone number with her. We met up for a coffee. She didn't seem particularly well, but she assured me that she was okay. A couple of weeks later, it was just after Christmas or just around Christmas, she called me and she said, could I come and meet her because she wasn't well and she wanted to see a psychiatrist. And she said there's something wrong with my mind. And so I planned to meet her, and we met at Gloucester Road Tube Station.
Wow.
And so as soon as I saw her, I realised that she was not well. She had her suitcase with her, and she was really clearly not in a good space. She was very disorientated. She kept asking me, why are we back in Russia? She couldn't, string a sentence together. She was just, really not in a good space. So I said, I'll get you some help, and took her somewhere safe for that evening. And the next day had, or next couple of days, planned to get her into the NRM, which is the National Referral Mechanism, which is a means of identifying people who've been trafficked.
In the UK.
UK.
That's what we use. That's the government's response to victims of trafficking. Yeah.
So she actually, we had this interview, but she said she sat in the interview with her hood up and all zipped up, and she said, I'm not going to say anything about the people who brought me here. They're good people. They waxed my legs and they did my nails, and I don't want to get anyone in trouble. And she'd been in prostitution since she was 15. That's what she told me. And her whole life had been exploitation, and she assumed, these people treating her nicely were, waxing her legs, were doing that because, I don't know, they cared about her or whatever. But so she wasn't prepared to tell her story, which meant therefore she was not entitled to any support.
Right.
So she was effectively given back to me, but she was really not well. Took her to hospital, St Thomas's, just down the road. She was admitted, but a couple of days later the social worker said, we're going to have to discharge your friend. Can you come and get her? I said, no, I'm at work. I can't go and get her. And she said, and I said, I've got nowhere for her to go. I was living with people, couldn't just have her in my flat, which would have been the easiest option. And I said, well, could you hold her at least till I've finished work? And I said, there's nowhere safe for her to go. And the social worker said, well, could she go back to where she came from? And I explained that was a brothel. And the social worker actually said to me, well, if it's not an abusive situation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, crazy.
So, that's fine for her to go back to a brothel as long as she's not being abused. What
right.
a strange response.
I know, crazy. So, obviously, didn't send her back there.
No.
And, then it was a really difficult, it ended up, I think, about 3 months of just trying to keep her safe, and I stayed in various different places throughout that time until the point that she had a complete breakdown, and she was then sectioned. And then this hospital was brilliant with her, and they took really good care of her, but at the same time they were saying to me, we don't want to have to put her out on the street, but if there's nowhere for her to go, and she wasn't prepared to try and stay here and seek asylum here, wasn't prepared to tell her story, as I explained, so the only option was for her to go back. And so she ended up going back to Uzbekistan, and a month later she contacted me and she was back in Bangkok.
Wow.
And I hear from her regularly still, and she's still, unfortunately, still in the sex industry, still doesn't want to be doing that. The time in London, she would say to me repeatedly, I want to be safe, I want to stop this work, I want to study, but without a safe place as a starting point, they knew she couldn't begin that journey. And so that was sort of, and all through that time I kept thinking, I wish I had somewhere for her to be. I wish I could, if I could have just brought her into my own home, I would have done. One, it would have saved me a lot of hassle of trying to find her other places, but there were, as I said, I couldn't do that at that time, and I was just thought that's what's needed, a place where people don't need to tick all sorts of boxes when they want a way out of exploitation.
Yeah.
So that's how, the idea for starting a home began. And then we opened our first home in January 2016.
Amazing. You've opened a second one recently, right?
Yeah, October last year.
Can you say how many people you cater for, or is that private?
Oh, yeah, I can say that. So in our small numbers, so in our first home, it feels more than it is. In our first home, it's a 4-bedroom house, but we've actually got 5 women living there. So we have an emergency space, but the emergency is turned into semi-permanent.
Right.
And in our second home, we've got 3 spaces. So yes, that's the accommodation based and support. But we realised quite early on that there was a lot more women being referred to us than we could offer accommodation.
Yeah.
So we have an outreach service, and I don't actually know how many now. We work with maybe 30. Who are living in sort of NAS accommodation, so asylum support accommodation, or temporary housing, or private rented, again, who have all experienced trafficking.
Right.
But
so you're not just working with the women that you're accommodating?
No.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things you said which stood out to me was long-term support, right? And I think a great deal of focus, quite understandably and quite rightly in many ways, is on rescue, getting someone out of a situation, kicking down doors, sweeping them out of hell, and getting them out. I totally understand that. Less time is spent on the days, months, years of people's lives that are wrecked as a consequence of long periods of sustained abuse, and the psychological harm and the spiritual and soulful harm that's done to individuals as they live through that lifestyle. That's not going to be dealt with a door going through on a police raid, and there's the keys to a new place, or there's you're not in a position of slavery anymore, or good luck with the rest of your life. Actually for many people that's where that it all begins. The new life begins, but new challenges and struggles begin. And I've got so much admiration for you and other people that are part of this process. The long, sticky, messy, grey, murky, elongated, prolonged story of restoration, because it's not as glamorous as the door going in, and it's flipping hard. And I really do take my cap off to you. What could we do better, do you think, from your experience the last few years? Maybe if I ask on behalf of, I know we've got an amazing international audience, but on behalf of this country where we're recording the podcast, London, UK, what do you think? Have you made any observations that you think we could do, what we need to do better? Obviously we need to provide more safe houses if you're finding that you're not in a position to take on some of these referrals. And is that something that the government should be doing, or more people like yourself need to start things? Like, what do you think?
Oh, that's a big question.
You don't have to have a perfect political answer. I'm just interested in your opinion as a consequence of your experience.
Oh, there's so many ways I could answer that. I think for a lot of the women that we work with, one of the real challenges is that they wait such a long time for a decision on their case, decision whether or not they have actually been a victim of trafficking. Then they're waiting on a decision for their asylum, because a lot of the women don't feel that they can return home. And essentially their life is on hold, and they the fear of that they may have to return to their country is terrifying. Just even today, I had a really difficult day, but one case that's just been referred to us because she doesn't want to go into the NRM system because she's afraid that it will mean that she may end up being deported.
Wow.
I'm trying to assure her that's not the case. But let's say that I think if the quicker decisions were made, that people then could feel that they could get on with their life, could get on with recovery, that would really help.
I just wonder, Emily, with all that going on, I just wonder what a normal day looks like for you. Today's podcast was somewhat delayed. Not a problem with that, of course, but due to the fact you had a situation to deal with. We've known each other for a few months now, and this is not the first time I've known you had to deal with situations. I know people's lives don't tend to fit around a normal 9-to-5 schedule if you're dealing with their long-term support. So how do you manage that? Like, what motivates you to do what you do?
Yeah, so every day potentially there is some kind of crisis to attend to. By 11 o'clock this morning I'd heard some terrible things, and I was just thinking, oh, it's going to be a long day. And
when you say terrible things, can you expand at all?
So I was meeting with one woman that we're working with, and she's just been having a very difficult time, and just sharing some of her past experience, and how it's impacting her at the moment. So she's actually, I don't do much of the casework or case support anymore, but I was meeting I do meet with this particular woman. We met for a couple of hours, and then just as you arrived, there was another situation with one of our other women that we're working with who's feeling suicidal. So I was having to connect with my colleague to deal with that situation. But also this evening at about 5 o'clock, got a text from our house manager at one of the houses who sent a message to our team, because that we've recently taken on a resident moved out a few weeks ago, and a new resident moved in a couple of weeks ago, and she was catching up with her this evening or earlier in the earlier afternoon, and asking how she had settled in, and apparently this woman had said to her, "Now I'm at home." Nice. Now I'm home. And that was just a really nice sort of thing to hear at 5 o'clock, having had a pretty difficult day. Yeah. So I think it's those moments of being able to provide a safe place for women, and then being able to see how they can essentially get on with living the life, and accessing what they need for recovery that makes it worthwhile.
And you've seen, I imagine, in the last few years, women come through your services and leave your services, and
lots of women
go on to live independently.
Yeah, which is great.
Amazing.
A lot of the women that come to our home, we get referred particularly difficult, high trauma cases, and so lots of the women will need long term support. But loads of really amazing stories, and that is definitely what keeps me going, and why I want to keep doing this work, is because I have seen and do know so many women who've been through this, but then go on to live completely normal, independent, happy lives. Just this week, connecting with I would actually call her a friend now, but she's somebody who I caseworked for maybe 3 years, and she's British, and she was trafficked into Europe when she was 19 years old, I think. Grew up in care, went to university, met a guy online, and she was feeling lonely at university, so he came over to visit her, then he said, well, why don't you come and visit me? So she went over, and then didn't escape for a year until one day she saw that her passport was lying around, saw a way to get some money, came back into took it and took a cab to the airport. Was really afraid what they were going to ask her at immigration, because she'd been gone for a year. She was wearing like a nightie because it was the only piece of clothing that she could find, but no one asked her any questions.
Wow.
She came back into the country. Still, no one asked her any questions. She went to her old social worker's office, and her social worker said, "What are you doing here? I thought you were at university."
Wow,
Essentially,
no one even realised she was out of uni.
Yeah, no one had seen that she was missing for an entire year.
Gosh.
And so I got to meet her. Long story how we connected, but she had only been back here a few months, and one of the first things she said to me was, "I just want to be normal again." Now you could see all over her that she'd experienced something terrible. She couldn't look me in the eye. She was really, it was obvious that she was had been through something very difficult, and then we sort of talked about what she wanted to do, and in the end she ended up going back to university. I said, if you want to lead a normal life, you either need to study or you need to go to work. I suggest going to study, a bit easier.
Definitely easier than working.
Yeah. So she...
If you study anything like me, yeah.
So,
At my university.
well, she actually, I think, she was so smart and wanted to study medicine, started that, but then went on to study social work, ended up with a first class degree, top of the year.
Yes.
And she is remarkable. You would, if you met her now, you would never know that, she's completely unrecognisable to the person that I met, several years ago. Got into running. She runs ultras. She's amazing woman. Yeah.
It's incredible. Thanks for sharing that story. That's a fantastic story of hope.
I told her she should come on your podcast.
Oh, flipping, you would be my guest if you're listening. That would be amazing. I'd be incredibly privileged to hear your story.
Oh.
You, very briefly, because I'm going to close fairly soon, but you did use the word ultra. Some people were like, what? Okay.
What? Yeah.
You don't want to talk about it, you do. Emily recently took part in an ultra marathon, which is obviously more than a marathon. It's ultra more.
Yeah.
In order to raise money for Ella's, right?
Yeah.
What was that all about?
What are we going to talk about?
Just
that?
a little bit, just 30 seconds.
So that was with Tribe.
Very impressive.
Yeah. Nah.
How long was the run?
It was really long. It was 280 kilometres, 160 miles.
Wow.
But over very big hills.
Yeah.
And I've told you many times how many hours I spent on my feet. A lot of hours.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was great. And yeah, so I can say that blood, sweat and tears goes into my fundraising.
Yeah, literally, yeah. Yeah, that's all you're giving me on that. What a comprehensive account of that remarkable life-changing experience. Emily, we're almost up and we're almost out of time. You've done incredibly well. Can I ask you a series of questions as we close? Would that be all right?
Sure.
I want to ask you 3 distinct questions.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, what makes you angry about the world?
Mm-hmm. I guess, well, I have a lot to be angry about when I, hear women's stories and I hear how they've been treated. And stories of people using their power to control and manipulate and harm other people makes me very angry.
Yeah, I bet. Flipping the coin.
Okay.
What makes you happy about the world?
I'm a very happy person.
Despite the anger.
Yeah, despite the anger.
There's also plenty of happiness there.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of happiness. because I do see a lot of hope.
Mm.
I get to, as I've said, I think numerous times throughout this podcast, get to work with incredible women, get to work with women who've experienced the very worst and really should, how and why they would want to be happy or generous or compassionate towards others. They have no reason to, and yet they choose to. And I love seeing that. I love seeing when the women we work with display those traits and are generous and kind, and that they're, I guess, even grateful for the life that they get to lead. And I think that's lovely, to be able to have gratitude for life and to want to make the most of it despite having had terrible experiences.
Final question.
Mm-hmm.
If you could ask the world to change in one way, what would you ask?
Well, I see a lot of the terrible things I see, a lot of the stories I hear from the women, a lot of what they've experienced is because they have been treated like a commodity rather than a person, and they've been seen as disposable, and just something to be used rather than someone to be loved and respected and treated with compassion and kindness. So I would ask that that we can all respect and see the humanity in each other.
I think that is a great ask of the world, and I think that's a great place to end our time together. Emily, thank you that we managed to get this done. Thank you for giving me your evening. I really appreciate having a chance to chat with you, hear a little bit more of your story, a lot in there that I didn't already know. I think you're amazing, and your team is amazing, and everything you're doing is incredible. And I want us to be able to help you in some way, if it's not financially, which I'd love it to be, but like if there's anything else we can do to support you, please let us know. And if there's anybody listening, like, is there anything we, as a bunch of listeners, we can do to support Ella's in any way? Can you think of anything? Do you have, like, obviously we can follow you guys on social media, but is there anything else you could ask of us at all?
You could follow us. That's great, because then you can see when we have different needs and requests, and sign up for our newsletter, and we often have ways that people can get involved and support our work. So thanks for that, Bryn.
That's great. I'm sure there'll be people that will take you up on that.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for putting up with us. And editing all the awkward bits out, including that bit.
No, we'll keep it that.
Oh, you better not.
Yeah, we kept it. So there you have it. I've come to realise that I just couldn't do what Emily does. I don't have the natural resources of compassion and patience required to do the job. But I can support her and her team, and perhaps you can too. If you're on Instagram, give them a follow at ellas.org.uk. That is, incidentally, the same name as their website. And like Emily said, sometimes they will reach out to their followers for help and support. If you're not in a financial or material position to support them, perhaps you could send them an encouraging message. I'm sure they would really appreciate that. I really appreciated Emily's honesty in that podcast. And like she shared, Ella's story hasn't concluded with a Hollywood happy ever after ending, has it? It's real, and it's tough, and it's sad. We need to find safe places to house people when they manage to escape a situation of exploitation, where they have some time to get their lives together and receive the support that is available for them. Without these places, their vulnerability to being re-trafficked is huge. If we're serious about ending this, And seeing those numbers begin to fall. I mean, 40 million people is the latest estimate, remember, for people living in slavery. We have to have a holistic approach. It doesn't end at the rescue stage. In many ways, that's just the beginning. And by not having appropriately equipped safe houses, it's like trying to collect water with a sieve. Anyway, thank you, as ever, for listening along. I'd also like to thank Sam for donating to our podcast Kickstarter campaign, which has allowed us to have these conversations. Thank you, Sam. This show has been produced by Blue Bear Coffee Co. for coffee lovers with a heart for justice. If you would like to find out more about Blue Bear, you can go to our website, bluebearcoffee.com, and give us a follow on social media at Blue Bear Coffee Co. Until next time, peace.